Welcome to the respiratory system. This system is such a vital component in our everyday lives. By providing a way for oxygen to enter and be spread throughout our entire body, the respiratory system contributes to keeping the body alive and energized. To understand the importance of the respiratory system, we first need to understand what structures make up the system. The main structures within the respiratory system are the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. The nose allows air to enter into the body, and from the pharynx to the bronchi, a tube-like pipeline directs the air into the lungs. Looking at the passage of air into the body, we gain a more in-depth understanding of the anatomy and how that contributes to the respiratory system's physiology. Air initially enters through the nose, specifically through the nares of the nostrils, and then flows through the nasal cavity into the pharynx. From the pharynx, air travels through the larynx into the trachea, which divides into the main bronchi before entering the lungs. Once in the lungs, air travels through increasingly smaller branching structures from the secondary bronchi into the tertiary bronchi. The end of the tertiary bronchi branches into smaller terminal bronchioles, and then into the respiratory bronchioles before dumping into the alveolar ducts. The alveolar ducts lead into the alveolar sacs that contain alveoli for gas exchange. To remove carbon dioxide, the process occurs in reverse via exhalation. Now that we know the anatomy, we can look at what exactly the respiratory system does. The main function of the system is respiration. Respiration is the process of transporting oxygen into the body and removing carbon dioxide from the body. It also performs several other functions, such as regulating the body's pH, sensing smells, expelling foreign materials via the coughing reflex, and the process of making noises. The respiratory system can be divided based on anatomy or physiology. Anatomically, the upper respiratory system contains the nose, nasal cavity, and pharynx. The lower respiratory system contains the larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. When the respiratory system is divided physiologically, it is divided into the conducting and respiratory zone. The conducting zone acts as a pathway for air, expels waste from the airway, and moistens and heats air. It includes the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and terminal bronchioles. The only function of the respiratory zone, however, is gas exchange. It includes only the respiratory bronchioles and the alveoli. The nose marks the beginning of the respiratory system. It functions as the entrance into the nasal cavity. The main function of the nose is to heat, humidify, and purify the air as it enters the body. It is also the primary site where perception of scents or odors occurs. Similarly, the nasal cavity shares the same function as the nose. The external nares or nostrils act as openings into the body. The nasal vestibule filters air as it enters the nasal cavity. The nasal conchae amplify the space available inside the nose. Meatuses and conchae retain water in the nasal cavity. The internal nares are openings from the nasal cavity into the pharynx. Sinuses are pockets of air within their respective facial bones that produce mucus. These include the frontal, sphenoid, ethmoid, and maxillary sinuses. They heat and moisten air. The ciliated respiratory membrane backing the paranasal sinuses, meatuses, and conchae functions in the removal of waste from the nasal cavity. After air leaves the nasal cavity through the internal nares, it enters the pharynx. The pharynx or throat functions as a passageway for the transport of air and food. The pharynx is divided into three sections that support its main function. The nasopharynx is a segment of the pharynx that functions solely in air transport, while the oropharynx and laryngopharynx are segments of the pharynx that function to convey both air and food. From the pharynx, air enters the larynx. The larynx, or voice box, controls how much air is inhaled into or exhaled out of the lungs, as well as sound production. The vocal cord's main function is phonation, or the production of sounds. The vestibular folds, or false vocal cords, contract to relax or alter the voice's pitch. Smaller cartilaginous pieces like the cuneiforms, arytenoids, and corniculates aid in sound production via their attachments to the epiglottis and vocal cords. The larynx's major structures are the thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage, and epiglottis. The thyroid cartilage is one of the larger cartilage pieces that makes up the larynx. The cricoid cartilage makes up the circular structure that supports the larynx, while the epiglottis opens to allow liquid and food into the esophagus or closes during swallowing to prevent it from entering the trachea. Air travels superiorly from the larynx into the trachea. The trachea, or windpipe, is a tubular structure that functions as a passageway for air to flow from the larynx to the lungs and vice versa. The carina is the last ring of the trachea that expels foreign waste or pathogens from the body by instigating the cough reflex. Air moves from the trachea through the bronchi and into the lungs. The lungs are bilobed organs in the thoracic cavity that are supplied by branching main bronchi. The left lung contains only a superior and inferior lobe, segmented by an oblique fissure. The right lung is separated into a superior, middle, and inferior lobe by an oblique and horizontal fissure. The cardiac notch is a deep depression in the left lung for the heart to occupy. The medial surface is adjacent to and surrounds the mediastinum. The apex is the most superior point of the lung beneath the clavicle. The base is the flat inferior section of the lungs above the diaphragm, while the costal surface is closest to the ribs. The hilum is an indention found in the lung's medial surface where blood and lymph vessels, along with nerves and bronchi, enter the lung. The visceral pleura is the serous membrane encompassing the lungs, while the pleural cavity is an opening in the space between the visceral and parietal pleura. The parietal pleura lines the thoracic wall, diaphragm, and mediastinum. The main bronchi act as a bridge between the trachea and lungs that delegate the air into their respective lungs. The main or primary bronchi are divisions of the trachea that provide oxygen to the right or left lung. The secondary or lobar bronchi provide oxygen to the superior, middle, and inferior lobes of the lungs. The tertiary or segmental bronchi provide oxygen to the bronchopulmonary segments within the lungs. Small branching structures, known as bronchioles, originate from the tertiary bronchi. Bronchioles are the end of the bronchial tree and are capped with alveolar sacs. Terminal bronchioles are the last structure in the conducting zone and funnel air in and out of the respiratory zone. The respiratory bronchioles transport air between the terminal bronchioles and the alveoli. At the end of the bronchioles lie the alveolar ducts. Alveolar ducts are tubes that direct airflow in and out of the alveoli from the bronchioles. Alveolar sacs are bulbous collections of the alveoli for gas exchange. The alveoli's main function, or technically only function, is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide within the lungs. Alveolar pores create openings between alveoli to allow consistent airflow and pressure between other alveoli. The alveolar wall is an important layer of cells that surrounds the alveoli. The type 1 alveolar cells are simple squamous epithelial cells that function solely in gas exchange. Type 2 alveolar cells create surfactant, which is used to break up the alveoli's surface tension. Alveolar macrophages ingest and remove any cellular waste. The alveolar wall contributes directly to the respiratory membrane as well. The respiratory membrane consists of 4 layers: the alveolar wall, the epithelial basement membrane, the capillary basement membrane, and the capillary endothelium. The respiratory membrane is an important structure for gas exchange across the alveoli. Inspiratory and expiratory muscles are important structures in breathing. The diaphragm and external intercostal muscles are the main inspiratory and expiratory muscles. Inspiration is the process of bringing oxygen into the body as the external intercostals and diaphragm contracts. Expiration is the process that removes carbon dioxide from the body as the external intercostals and diaphragm relax. In conclusion, the respiratory system is an incredibly important part of our body. By understanding the anatomy and physiology of the structure, we are able to learn more about how it operates and ourselves. Whether it be respiration or simply taking in the smells around us, the respiratory system is in constant use. And with that, I'd like to direct your attention to the Works Cited pages in case you'd like to check out any of the sources for yourselves. Thank you for your time and attention.